Hello, good afternoon. I welcome you to our topic 8 in OB, conflict and negotiation. What are the learning objectives? We are here to describe the three types of conflict and the three loci of conflict, to outline the conflict process, to contrast distributive and integrative bargaining, to apply the 5 steps of the negotiation process, to show how individual differences influence negotiations, and to assess the roles and functions of parties in negotiations. What is conflict? Conflict is a process that begins when one party perceives another party that negatively, or is about to negatively affect something that the first party cares about. Conflict is a very common concept, and every human being is familiar with conflict, and so you know what conflict is. It's that point in an ongoing activity when an interaction crosses over to become an inter-party conflict. It encompasses a wide range of conflicts that people experience in organizations. Incompatibility of goals, differences over interpretations of facts, disagreement based on behavior, and so on and so on. So, perspectives on conflict, or call it transition in conflict thought. We start with the traditional view of conflict, and this is the belief that all conflict is harmful and must be avoided. That is the traditional view of conflict. But we will later see that not all conflicts are harmful and must be avoided. What causes this shift? What causes this view is that conflict is caused by poor communication, lack of openness, and failure to respond to employee needs. So, having looked at the traditional view of conflict, we move to the human relations view of conflict. This is the belief that conflict is a natural and inevitable outcome in any group. Conflict is a natural and inevitable outcome in any group. After that, we move to the third perspective, the interactivist view of conflict. This is the belief that conflict is not only positive in a group, but that it is absolutely necessary for a group to perform effectively. Well, there are two types of conflict, the functional versus the dysfunctional conflict. Functional conflict is that conflict that supports the goals of the group and improves performance. And dysfunctional conflict is that conflict that hinders group performance. So there are some good conflicts, and we're going to look at that in details, and there are bad conflicts that are called dysfunctional. They are destructive, they are counterproductive, but there are conflicts that are good, because life without conflict is not possible. Types of conflicts. We have the task conflict, which are conflicts over content and goals of the work. There's relationship conflict, which is conflict based on interpersonal relationships. And there's a process conflict, which is conflict over how work gets done. The conflict process. We start with stage 1, which is the potential opposition or incompatibility. It has some components, namely communication, where there's semantic difficulties, where there are misunderstandings, where there is noise. Once you have that, you're likely to have a conflict. And that's the beginning of conflict. There's also the structure. It is about the size and specialization of jobs. It's about jurisdictional clarity or ambiguity. It's about member goal or incompatibility. It's about leadership styles, whether it is closed or participative. It's about reward systems, whether it is a win or lose. And it's about dependency or interdependency of groups. And thirdly, you have the personal variables, which is differing individual value systems or personality types. So the conflict process begins at stage 1, where we have potential opposition or potential incompatibility. And as we have just seen, it could be at the level of communication, it could be at the level of the structure, and it could be at the level of personality, personal variables. All those can work together to start the conflict process. From that potential conflict, from that potential, you move to stage 2, which is cognition and personalization. The cognition and personalization here is divided into two: the perceived conflict and the felt conflict. Perceived conflict is awareness by one or more parties of the existence of conditions that create opportunities for conflict to arise. Just an awareness by one or more parties of the existence of conditions that create opportunities for conflict to arise. You must be aware that there are issues that can bring about conflict. Felt conflict is the emotional involvement in the conflict that they experience that lead to anxiety, tenseness, frustration, or hostility. So that's stage 2. You must have to perceive that the conditions, what the conditions we have are likely to create conflict, and then the emotional involvement where the conflict now is experienced through anxiety, through tenseness, through frustration, and through hostility. Then we move to stage 3 of the conflict process. These are the intentions. What are intentions? These are decisions to act in a given way, and intentions are a distinct stage because we have to infer the other's intent to know how to respond to behavior. So intentions that are brought into conflict are eventually translated into behavior. Intentions are very, very important. You can never know one's intention. Sometimes people misunderstand others' intentions. And once you misunderstand somebody's intention, you're likely to begin to infer that this person is disagreeing with you, this person is opposing you, this person has a different agenda, this person is beginning to step on your feet, this person is minimizing you, this person is abusing you, because the intention you don't know what the intention is, and so you begin to guess that maybe he wanted to hurt me. Maybe he wanted to minimize me. So intentions are very, very important. So in a conflict, unless you understand the intention, the conflicts are likely to arise. So there are dimensions of the conflict handling intentions, and we're going to look at majorly cooperativeness, and which is an attempt to satisfy the other party's concerns. And then there is assertiveness, which is an attempt to satisfy one's own position. So those two dimensions will help us to understand 5 different approaches to understanding conflict. So using these 2 dimensions of assertiveness and cooperativeness, we can identify 5 conflict handling intentions. Namely, 1, competing. This is a desire to satisfy one's interests regardless of the impact of the other party to the conflict. You are so assertive and you're so uncooperative. It is your side of things that matters. It is you who should get it right. It is you who should win. Nobody else should win. You are so assertive and you're not willing to cooperate with the other party. So that is intention. That is the first intention out of the 5 dimensions. Competing. This is the worst case scenario where you want to win at all costs. Then there is collaborating, which is a situation in which the parties to a conflict each desire to satisfy fully the concerns of all parties. There is assertiveness, but also there is cooperativeness. So it is the parties to the conflict desire to satisfy fully the concerns of all parties. Collaborative handling of conflicts. This is the opposite of what we have above there as competing. So the third one is avoiding. This is the desire to withdraw or suppress a conflict. You are unassertive and you are uncooperative. This is a dangerous position. Once you recognize that there is a conflict, the worst thing you'd want to do is to avoid it. Because when you don't talk about it, when you don't want to attempt to solve it, it goes underground and can explode. So avoiding a conflict is not very advisable, because you need to verbalize the issues that are at stake. You need to cooperate with your other party, the conflict. Otherwise, you are sitting on a time bomb. The fourth model is the accommodating. The willingness of one party in a conflict to place the opponent's interest above his or her own. You are not assertive, but you are cooperative. So you withdraw your own personal interest, and then you cooperate with your party, with the party to the conflict. This is accommodating. This is important because you want the other party to take the day so that this conflict is minimized or actually solved. And there's also the fifth one and the last one, the compromising. This is a situation in which each party to a conflict is willing to give up something. Everyone is willing to give up something. This is a mid-range between assertiveness and cooperativeness. You are not as assertive as you want to be, but also you are not as cooperative to the extent of giving up, but you want a win-win situation. Okay? You want a win-win situation, so you are willing to exchange. Give up part of your interest, and then also give up part of the other one. The other one should also give up part of his or her interest, so that there is compromise. There's compromise. So the conflict process now moves on to the fourth stage, and that is the behavior stage. When most people think about conflict or think of conflict, they tend to focus on stage 4 because this is where conflicts become visible. The behavior stage includes statements, actions, and reactions made by conflicting parties, usually as overt attempts to implement their own intentions. So what is visible normally in a conflict is what you see, the behavior you see. So then you hear what you hear. When people begin to throw things, when people begin to express themselves harshly, when people begin to throw tantrums, then you know that there is a conflict. But it started all away along, far, with the intention, with potential perception of whatever is happening. And it moves on until it reaches behavior. So it is not just the existence of conflict or even the type of conflict that creates problem, but the way people respond to conflict and manage the process once conflicts arise that is important. If the conflict is dysfunctional, what can the parties do to de-escalate it? There are various ways to de-escalate conflict. One of which is to use the use of resolution and simulation techniques to achieve the desired level of conflict. So the conflict process then moves on and goes on. So continuing on the outcomes of the conflict process, we have the functional outcomes, and then later on we are going to look at the creative functional conflict. But functional outcomes of a conflict are increased group performance. When a conflict is functional, when a conflict is useful, then you are likely to get increased group performance, improved quality of decisions, stimulation of creativity and innovation, encouragement of interest and curiosity, provision of a medium for problem solving, and creation of an environment for self-evaluation and change. That's when conflict is functional. But there's also creating functional conflict, which is through rewarding dissent and punishing conflict avoidance. Stage 5, outcomes continued. Dysfunctional outcomes from conflict are development of discontent, reduced group effectiveness, retarded communication, reduced group cohesiveness, and infighting among group members. Those are the dysfunctional outcomes of conflict. When conflict becomes not useful, counterproductive, when conflict needs to be solved, resolved, those are dysfunctional conflicts, and they have negative outcomes. In OB, everyone should struggle to solve dysfunctional conflicts. So How do we solve conflict? One of the ways to solve conflict is through negotiation. Negotiation is a process in which two or more parties exchange goods or services and attempt to agree on the exchange rate for them. This is a generic definition. But the same thing happens with conflict negotiation. It's like you are selling something. You have your side of the bargain, the other person has his or her side of the bargain, and you want to agree. Because in a conflict, everybody thinks is right. And so you have to give up part of what you know, part of what you feel, in order to accept part of what the other person feels and knows. That's a negotiation process. There is this thing called BATNA, which an acronym for the best alternative to a negotiated agreement, which is the lowest acceptable value or outcome to an individual for a negotiated agreement. When you go for a negotiation, you must have the lowest that you can take. I mean, it's a bargain. Just like when you are selling land or selling a house, you must have a minimum price. And because of haggling and bargaining, if you want 200,000 from something, you will say, I need 300,000. But you know that 200,000 is what you need. So when you begin to bargain at 300,000, there will be back and forth movement. But when you get anything above 200, you will know that you have got more than what you expected. So that's your partner. So your partner determines the lowest value acceptable to you for a negotiated agreement. Any offer you receive that is higher than your partner is better than an impulse. Bargaining strategies. There are two major bargaining strategies we're going to discuss here. One of which is the distributive bargaining, where this is negotiation that seeks to divide up a fixed amount of resources. You win or I lose. It's a win-lose situation. I mean, you have a fixed resources. If the budget is fixed at 200 million, and you want to take a big cut, if you want a big cut from the 200 million, which is fixed, the other party has to lose in order for you to get a bigger cut. That's a win-lose situation. Because the budget is fixed, any increase on your side will mean a reduction on the other party's side. That's what we call distributive bargaining. So are you going to bargain so that one person wins and the other one loses? Or what kind of bargaining are you going for? Now that leads us to the second part, the second strategy for bargaining called integrative bargaining. These are negotiations that seek one or more settlements that can create a win-win situation. It's possible actually to get a win-win situation. And most often, if you are negotiating a conflict, we try to reach a win-win situation. Everybody wins something. And if you go from the other perspective of partner, you go to a negotiation believing that if they give you 200,000, you'll be satisfied. The other person also comes to the bargaining table saying, if I could only pay 230, I would be a happy person. So in the negotiation, both of you will have gained. Because in your mind, the mind of your partner the value of the property could be 250,000, but he wants to pay less by 20,000. While for you, you know that the lowest you'd accept is 200,000. But now, after a negotiation, you end up with a deal of 230,000. So the other person has quasi, in principle, gained 20,000, and you have in principle gained 30,000. So both of you have won. That is integrative bargaining. So in the issues of negotiation, we have various factors, one of which is the role of personality or personality traits in negotiation. Traits do not appear to have a significant direct effect on the outcome of either bargaining or negotiating process. But it's important to know, generally speaking, people who are more assertive, people who are more open, may actually go out of a bargain with a bigger cut than people who are not open, people who are not assertive. They might get a smaller deal out of the bargain. Then there's what we call there are gender differences in negotiation. This is also important to note that women negotiate not differently from men, although men apparently negotiate slightly better outcomes. But sometimes women even also negotiate a better outcome than the men. So it's really an issue of situations, and maybe also an issue of the nature of the person. So men and women with similar power bases use the same negotiation style, and women's attitudes towards negotiation success as negotiators are less favorable to men's. So, having looked at those factors for negotiation, we move to the third-party negotiations. This is where you involve third parties in the negotiation. We have been talking about party A and party B in the negotiation process. But here we bring party C, and that party C is called the third party. It can be a mediator, which is a neutral third party who facilitates a negotiated solution by using reasoning, persuasion, and suggestions for alternatives. Mediator, a go-between, a person who brings you together to a round table to negotiate as a mediator. He has no personal interest in the matter, but he is an expert, he is gifted, and is able to mediate you. There's also what we call the arbitrator. This is also a third party to a negotiation who has authority to dictate an agreement. An arbitrator has power and can be able to dictate an agreement. It's not a mediator who just brings you together to talk and moderates. Arbitrator is a party that has authority to dictate an agreement. So there's also the third type of third party called conciliator. This is a trusted third party who provides an informal communication link between the negotiator and the opponent, the conciliator, the person who tries as much as possible to conciliate, call it reconciliate. He provides an informal communication link between the negotiator and the opponent, back and forth, trying to bridge the gap, trying to bridge the impasse, so and so on. And there is also this final group called the consultant, which is an impartial third party. An impartial third party, skilled in conflict management, who attempts to facilitate creative problem solving through communication and analysis. Conflict handling intention, competition. When quick, decisive action is vital, like in emergencies, competition is important. The competition intention is good for conflict handling. Where unpopular actions need implementing, e.g. cost cutting, enforcing unpopular rules, enforcing discipline, competition is necessary. You remember, competition is a situation where you are both assertive and cooperative. Both assertive and cooperative. You're not willing to give up any interests. You talk, and not ready to listen because your interest is primary. So in a situation whereby there is a need for a quick decision, there's an emergency, negotiations may not be possible. So, or where you are going to undertake a cost cutting or enforce unpopular rules or discipline, negotiation may not be strong. On issues vital to the organization's welfare, when you know you are right, and against people who take advantage of non-competitive behavior. So there are situations where the competition intention of conflict handling is important in the situations that we have just described. When is collaboration important? When is collaboration important as a conflict handling intention? To find an integrated solution when both sets of concerns are too important to be compromised. So you need to collaborate if both sets of concerns are too important to compromise. When your objective is to learn, then you collaborate. To emerge insights from people with different perspectives, you need to accept that everybody has an insight bringing onto the table, so you do collaboration. To gain commitment by incorporating concerns into a consensus, so that people may be committed to that decision, you need collaboration. And finally, to work through feelings that have interfered with the relationship. When the relationship is sour and the negotiation is getting the wrong way, you may go for collaboration so that you restore that relationship. When is avoidance necessary? When is avoidance necessary? When an issue is trivial or more important issues are pressing. When you perceive no chance of satisfying your concerns. If you know that you will not get anything out of this deal, maybe the other party is too strong, you just avoid it and go your way. When the potential disruption outweighs the benefits of resolution, if the conflict and the negotiation process will disrupt the process of something, you would rather avoid it. To let people cool down and regain perspective. When gathering information supersedes immediate decisions. And when others can resolve the conflict effectively other than you, and when issues seem tangential or symptomous to other issues. So these are situations where avoidance is necessary. You avoid because the thing is too small. We also have a lot of this in our day-to-day lives. There are things you say pass because it is not so important. It's not so important. And you want the other person to satisfy their concerns. Or the disruption that will occur because of your insisting is not worth the effort, and so on and so on. So that's when you do avoidance. Take avoidance and intention. When is accommodation a possibility? When do you choose the accommodation as a conflict handling intention? When you find you are wrong and to allow a better position to be had. When you accept you are wrong, then you go for accommodation. To learn and to show your reasonableness. When you take accommodation as a solution, when issues are more important to others than to yourself, and to satisfy others and to maintain cooperation. When to build social credits for later issues, to minimize loss when outmatched and losing, when harmony and stability are especially important, and finally, to allow employees to develop by learning from mistakes. That's when you pursue accommodation in conflict handling intentions. Finally, when do we pursue compromise? We pursue compromise when goals are important but not worth the effort or potential disruption of more assertive approaches. Yes, you need to achieve your goal, but then you are haggling too much, taking too long, handling a conflict. So the goals are important, but not the effort of the disruption caused by this conflict. So you go for compromise. When opponents with equal power are committed to mutually exclude goals. Opponents have equal power and are committed to mutually exclude goals. You go for compromise. To achieve temporary settlements to complex issues. To arrive at expedient solutions under time pressure. And as a backup, when collaboration or competition is successful. So these are the five conflict handling intentions that are available to us to use, and they all are useful in particular situations. And so for us as students of organizational behavior, we need to know that conflict and conflict negotiation is very, very important in organizational setup, because conflicts can impact on outcomes, output, productivity, performance, effectiveness, efficiency, profits, and so on. You have to make sure that conflict, which is dysfunctional, does not escalate. Your task as a manager, your task as a student of OB is to make sure that conflicts don't escalate to a level which is destructive. Output begin to fall, activities begin to shrink, profits begin to fall, and so on and so on. That's why we've been able to learn what conflict is, the various types of conflict, the function of conflict, the dysfunctional conflict, and the various conflict handling intentions, the 5 of them that are basically built around assertiveness and cooperativeness. Combinations of these two, assertiveness and cooperativeness, produce 5 different conflict handling intentions. which we have just covered right now as a recap, and therefore be vigilant to know which conflict is functional and what type of conflict is dysfunctional. Functional conflict should be promoted, and it particularly when a task, when you begin to discuss a way forward, maybe to improve productivity, to improve output, to improve efficiency, and you are conflicting over that, this is the way ideas can be generated. Because opposing your suggestions may actually encourage you to think through what you have suggested. So that kind of conflict is very functional. It helps to improve activity, to improve performance. But those conflicts that are very destructive have the potential to destroy the organization. So that's the type of conflict that we need to avoid. That's the type of conflict that we need to solve. And we solve that through negotiations. And there are very many negotiation strategies that we have covered. So, ladies and gentlemen, we come to the end of this topic. The assignments and this particular video is going to be posted on the Moodle platform for your consumption. And we wish you all the best. Bye.